Good afternoon and a very warm welcome indeed to today's iOB business webinar. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on here. My name is Ben and I'm the resident business coach here at iOB Business, and I'll be the one taking you through today's webinar presentation. All right, so just before we get started, a little bit about how the webinar runs so that you have as much information as you possibly can before we get into today's session. All right, so if you do have any questions, we're always more than happy to answer them, and we'll do so at the end of today's webinar during the Q&A session. Now, we'll also take a gap or a pause in between each of the three core topics today to allow a chance to jot down any notes and indeed fire away with any questions you may wish to ask as well, and then we can get them answered for you once again at the end of today's session. So you're more than welcome to ask them at any time. We'll just pick them up for you at the end of the webinar. We always have a couple of questions, always a genuine pleasure to answer them. So please don't be shy in asking. We always get some fantastic questions. And no matter whether you believe it's a great question or not a great question, please don't be shy in asking it. We're always happy, and there is no such thing as a bad question. Okay, so for those of you that have been with us before, you'll be more than familiar with how it runs. Great to see you again. Thank you for joining. Thank you very much to those of you as well who have joined us for the first time today. It's great to see you, a genuine pleasure, and I'm very much looking forward to chatting through today's webinar session with you as well. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to switch off the video camera. You shouldn't be able to see my face anymore, but you should still be able to hear my voice, and in just a moment's time, you'll be able to see the presentation that we have for you today up on the screen there as well. Okay, so let's pull this up. There we go. Fantastic. All right. So now you should be able to see the presentation that we have for you today up on screen, and you should also be able to hear my voice. If I could please just ask a big favor right before we get kicked off for today's webinar session, just let me know that you can hear my voice okay, and let me know that you can see the presentation up on screen okay there as well. And then I will know that we are ready to get started. So I'll just take a brief moment, make sure that that's all good. In the chat box, thumbs up, smiley face, yes, Ben, whatever works. That would be awesome. Thank you very much. All good, Ben? Excellent. All right, grand. So if you do have any issues on today's webinar, not that we ever expect you to have any, but if you do, please don't be shy in letting us know. We'll do whatever we can to get you back into the webinar or back online, enjoying the webinar. All right, so let's get kicked off then without further ado. We've done all the sound checks, we've done all the visual checks, we are ready to rock. So today's topic of conversation, can your new digital agency have more than one niche? Okay, big question, and a very big question indeed in the startup world. Can my new digital agency have more than one niche? It's a big question, so let's get it answered for you today. Okay, now, my name is Ben. I'm a business coach. I'm the resident business coach here at iOB Business, and I specialize in working with small businesses. So it's a genuine pleasure to be on here today, and a genuine pleasure to answer any questions that you might have for us as well. All right. So getting started then, number one, defining a niche. Okay. So we're going to talk about what defining a niche really means. And if a niche or the concept of a niche is new to you, don't worry. That's exactly what we're going to talk about. Number two, understanding your business priorities. Okay. So looking at it from this context, what do we need to prioritize in our business to make sure that we're running the best possible startup we could possibly be running? And number three, growing your digital agency long term. Okay, so we're going to talk about all three of these topics in good detail. We're going to take a pause in between each to make sure that we have plenty of time for questions and for notes. So we'll leave the slides up on screen so that you have plenty of time to take any notes you might wish to take as well. So let's get started. Number one, defining a niche. Okay, now a niche in business is typically defined by the area within an industry you may choose to select as your ideal client. Okay, so an area within an industry. All right, so there's perhaps a slight definition in the business world that a niche may be an industry in and of itself. All right, for example, let's say that I opened a digital agency and I decided to go into the automobile industry. And I said, well, my niche is automobiles, okay? Cars, trucks, lorries, vans. Now, what we would always encourage even further than that is to develop a more specific niche, okay? Because what we're actually talking about, if we were to use that example that I just gave you as our niche, that's actually really more of a general industry. It's not so much a niche, all right? So we need to think about a niche within the industry. And if we said, okay, well, look, my new digital marketing agency is going to operate in the automobile sector, and we're going to specialize in working with car dealerships. Car dealerships are our niche. Automobile industry is our industry. And digital marketing is our business, okay? Now, let's give you another example, okay? Your industry focus might be small business or food and drink sector, okay? Two pretty popular industries or areas of business, if you like. Now, you could even say that small business is bigger than an industry. It is, okay? So we're using really, really big, broad examples here of what an industry or a broader area of the market may look like. So, for example, your industry focus may be small business or food and drink sector. Now, if I ask you a little bit, have a think about what a niche could be within either of these things. All right. Now, I'm going to give you the answer in just a moment's time, but it's a great exercise to allow yourself a little bit of an opportunity here to think about, well, what might the niche be within the bigger sector, within the bigger industry? So we have small business and we have food and drink. Okay. Now, I'll give you the answer. Okay. Your niche focus then kicks in within the industry. So, for example, you choose to work within small businesses and they specialize in fast food, okay? Now, this is still pretty broad. And here's the thing about a niche. You want it to be specific, but you don't want to essentially pigeonhole yourself into an area where you don't have very much movement. And I'll give you an example of this. Let's say that you decided to work with small businesses in your local town that only sell food during the day, for example, okay? Now, you're maybe looking at perhaps 4 to 5 businesses, and that's just not enough. It's not enough because we need to work off of numbers, okay? Now, what we're looking at in this concept is understanding the fact that we have to make sure that we have a niche so that we can specialize in it and we can grow our skill set, we can develop a general understanding amongst our community and our market of what we do, but we don't want to be pigeonholed into something so specific that if these 5 very, very specific niche local businesses don't want to do business with us, then we're not standing there saying, oh, well, there's no customers or clients for me, okay? Now, niche may also be defined by the specific service offering you take to these prospective clients, okay? So again, if you wanted to get even more niche, you could say, well, I only offer food ordering platform for takeaway businesses, okay? But you do it in such a way that, again, you're not narrowing down your niche. So, for example, you could do this one nationwide. You could phone, email, run adverts to every single fast food business in the country, independent fast food business, and look at offering them your food ordering software, okay? Very, very interesting perspective and very, very interesting thought to take on these types of things. So, with that information, I'm now going to take the opportunity to have a pause. Please do take this moment to jot down any notes that you may wish to take. I'm going to leave the presentation there up for you on the screen just now so that you can read through that. You can process it again if you wish, and you can jot down notes. And of course, any questions, more than welcome. I'll see you again in just a moment's time. All right, perfect. So let's move on to topic number 2. Thank you for the questions. I'll get them for you at the end of today's session. They're all fantastic questions so far. Thank you. Topic number 2, understanding your business priorities. So the overall question here is, can your new digital agency have more than one niche? Now, your priority, especially in the offset, is to grow the business, okay? Now, this can occasionally mean being more flexible with your niche. Now, this is a very important point to think about, and it's a question I get asked an awful lot by early businesses. Can I have more than one niche, or do I need to be super ultra specific? So what I always recommend in this context is being flexible. And the reason for that is you allow yourself movement in and outside just ever so slightly of your niche to make sure that things are going as well as they possibly can for your early business. Now, you could look at this in essence as the most important thing in the early stages, of course, as long as you're capable of delivering any expectations you've agreed with clients, is simply the fact that you are bringing in business, you are bringing in income to your business. All right. So, for example, if you offer social media marketing for fast food restaurants, it may then be reasonable to consider offering your social media services to other small businesses. Okay. So, do we have a niche? Yes. But if another small business came along to you and they said, Ben, I'm looking at improving my social media presence. I'd like for you to market my business on social media on various platforms. Is this something that you can do? Now, the chances are, if you're a skilled social media expert and you're able to market and advertise on social media for fast food restaurants, it's also reasonable to believe the fact that you may be able to deliver this for other small businesses. For example, a gift shop, or let's say even a cafe or a coffee shop, or any other independent local small business. All right, local, not necessarily to your area, but in local towns of various areas. So it may be reasonable to consider this. So what I always say to the people that ask is stay true to your niche as much as possible, and in this way you're still adhering to your niche because you're still offering the same service for a similar style of business, in the fact that it's small, independent, and local. And this is very relevant because it's all about the way that you talk to prospective customers, the way the marketing comes across. And just because it's not all fast food businesses doesn't mean it's not going to be still effective. Okay. So as long as your offer and service delivery stay roughly the same and are applicable to the prospective client, this can work out for businesses. Okay. This can work out nicely in the fact that it allows you to really develop a good, solid foundation for your business, because you're not saying, no, thanks, you're not a fast food business, I'm not interested in working with you. Instead, what you're saying is, look, typically I do work with fast food businesses, but here are my core skills within digital marketing, within social media marketing, within these specific platforms. I think with reasonable research, these could apply, similar success to your business as well. Now, the key is to ensure that you're familiar with the industry niche and able to deliver for them. Okay. Now, familiarity doesn't always have to take long, but you should always research the industry, research the target audiences, research the markets to make sure that you are going to deliver well. Because especially if it's brand new or it's your first time doing this, you do need to make sure that you're able to deliver on any expectations that you might outline with a prospective new client in that specific field. So say, for example, it was a gift shop and they were selling, gifts for tourists, or, local gifts or birthday gifts, things like that. We need to make sure that you are able to market it as effectively as you have been for the other businesses. And this really comes down to understanding your own skill set and your ability, and also understanding the potential market of their niche and what you think you could achieve with them. So if you've done these things and you're still confident, absolutely no reason not to. All right. So that brings us to the end of topic number 2. Once again, we'll take a brief pause, give ourselves time to catch up on the slide, which again, I'll leave up on screen there. Please do ask away with any questions. It's been a very big topic, so absolutely more than happy to answer questions. And I will see you again in just a moment's time for the third and final topic of today's webinar. Fantastic. So let's get started with the third and final topic of today's presentation. Thank you for the question. I'll get that for you at the end. So growing your digital agency long term. Okay, so let's talk about this one. Now, an easily done yet potentially destructive mistake that can cause harm to the growth of your business is switching away from your core service offering. Okay. Now, we don't want to make this mistake early on, and there can be many reasons behind this, but some of the biggest ones that I see are, in essence, the grass is greener. All right. Or I like to refer to it as switching lanes. If you imagine you're on a racetrack and you're switching lanes because that lane looks better. and then you switch back to your own lane and realize you're not as far on as you would have liked to be because you didn't stick to the lane. If you're constantly switching lanes and you're constantly going over to new greener pastures, or what we believe to be new greener pastures, you may find yourself actually falling further and further and further behind. So what we want to make sure that we don't do is switch completely away from our core service offering. If we've built a business around social media marketing, and I'm using that only because we used it as an earlier example in topic number 2, if we then switch over massively into something like website development, and all of a sudden that's what we start doing because we see, oh, well, those businesses are making this amount of money and I believe it to be more productive because of XYZ reason and blah, blah, blah. There's nothing wrong with switching eventually or adding it on, like bolstering your existing business. But we want to be careful about doing that early on because it can actually be quite harmful and destructive to the growth of your business from the context of having to redevelop a new skill set, redevelop a new audience, redevelop a new lead generation system, all of the things that come around it. It's not just as simple as switching to something new, because if you remember the amount of preparation work you did to set up a business based around one thing, you would need to do all of that over again to ensure that you were doing it properly. So please don't make this mistake early on. Now, another mistake is to target a niche you are extremely unfamiliar with, okay? Now, what I mean by this is if you decide, again, somebody else seems to be making more money in a certain given niche and, it's going really, really well for them and blah, 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 and you don't know what it is necessarily that they're doing to get all of these clients, but you want a piece of that action, okay? It's a mistake. If you're unfamiliar with the niche and you don't understand the advertising, the lead generation, the market, what's going on, the service delivery that's expected by these clients, again, you run the risk of going in and making a mistake or several mistakes or mistakes that could potentially derail your business completely. And it's not necessary, okay? Even if you're making 75% of what you believe you could be making in another field, stay in your field and prove it. Prove it over a period of at least 12 months, maybe even more, to really give yourself a long-term look at how well it's doing, okay? And seasonally, does that have any effects? And all these kind of different things that are important to learn. Now, something I always say in business, track your metrics and understand your numbers. The more you understand all of these things, the more data and information you have. So you'd be able to see, well, historically, have I been more busy around December or more quiet, for example, okay? Things like this to think about. Now, let's say that you were busy in December. It means that you might have clients that operate seasonally as well. So they have very big Decembers, therefore they need you most. Okay. Now we're talking about, say, a chocolate brand, for example, around Christmas time, and you're working with them on social media campaigns. You might be busier than ever because lots of people like to buy chocolate over the Christmas period. Okay. So this is a mistake to sort of ignore these important components. Now, both of these things can hamper your growth because they could result in the following consequences. And these are consequences that, of course, we want to avoid for our business. Okay. Number one, inconsistency in your revenue due to constantly fluctuating fees. Okay. It's very difficult to get a gauge on how much we're earning if we're constantly changing the price and changing the product. Number two, upset clients due to lack of service delivery quality. We're going to a niche that we're unfamiliar with. We might find ourselves having problems delivering the caliber of service that's expected of us. Spread too thin effect. You're juggling so many services and niches that you cannot keep up. 1 minute you're building a website, the next minute you're running a paid ads campaign, the next minute you're writing a blog. It's too many different things to do in a short space of time, and you may find yourself without the time, or potentially even, hopefully not, but potentially even the ability to deliver these things well. Okay, so make sure that you're not doing these things. Okay, it's a very easily avoidable thing. Pick a lane, stay in the lane, prove that it's a success, and then add onto it as opposed to switching over. All right, so that brings us to the end of today's webinar session. What we'll do now is we'll take one final brief pause for any final notes and any final question. We'll then go into a recap of the 3 core topics from today's session, and then we'll enter the Q&A segment as well. So I'll give you one final brief pause, and I'll see you again in just a moment's time. Fantastic. So To recap today's session, number one, be clear on what a niche is. Topic number one, that's what we discussed, how to define what a niche is. Number two, use your niche for the benefit of your business and make sure that you're picking something that will genuinely bode well for you going forwards, okay? And finally, steer clear of delving into unfamiliar niches. It's a problem that you definitely do not need on your plate. All right, so that summarizes today's iOB business webinar. Now, as always, a massive thank you for taking the time to attend today's session. We appreciate it immensely, as always, and we hope that it's been a valuable topic of conversation for everyone on here today. Now, what I'll do is I'll get to the questions in just a minute. If you'd like to talk to a member of our team, you're more than welcome to head over to iob-business.com/talk. And on there, you can book a call at a time that suits you. So if you go over to this link, you'll see a calendar just like this one here up on the screen, and you'll be able to pick the perfect time and date for yourself to speak with us. Okay, so first question, how many service offerings should I have? All right, great question. So typical answer here is about 1 to 3 core offerings, okay? This depends on your skill set and how confident you are in delivering it. But generally, we say 1 to 3 because it allows us to measurably gauge how many packages or how many services we need to sell in order to earn a certain amount. And therefore, we can also work out our client capacity from there as well. Great question. Thank you for asking. Next question, should I say no to a completely random client? Awesome. Okay, cool. Great question. So by completely random, I'm going to assume that we're working on the basis of they're essentially in a niche that we've never worked in before. So my answer to that would be a question in and of itself. Can you deliver the service? Because if you can, then yes. And if you can't, then no. And also the other things we spoke about that are important to understand, the niche that your client or prospective client at this stage is in, the audience that they have, services, products, you know, if the business is seasonal, things like that. So fantastic question, and I hope that helps. Do we have any more questions on today's session? No, it doesn't look like we do. Okay, well, as always, thank you ever so much for taking the time to join. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next iOB business webinar. Bye for now.